to this space. So, today is Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. I just think it's a wonderful time. I'm from New Mexico, and we celebrate in New Mexico the Day of the Dead a lot more than other places. Historically, it is a celebration that was predominantly in Latin America, but most especially in Mexico. And it's been going on for millennia. And I'm putting this in quotes, the pagans of South America celebrated for 2 months. And then when the Spanish conquistadors came up through into Mexico, they brought their Catholicism and they tried to discourage the pagans from celebrating the dead. And it didn't work very well for them. So finally they compromised and made it a 2-day celebration. So on November the 1st, that is a celebration of children who have passed. And on November the 2nd, it's the celebration for all others. And it's really a wonderful, raucous celebration. There's nothing morbid or sad about it. It is a celebration of life rather than a celebration of death. So there's parades with people dressed like skeletons. Then they march off to the cemetery where they have food and drink and dance. And around the grave sites, they have little altars reminiscent and symbolic of the people who have passed. So I just think it's a wonderful time, and that's what I want to talk about today. A Gallup poll indicated that 90% of the American population believes in life after death, and 15% have had near-death experiences. So I know that this is a conversation that can seem a little woo-woo and a little odd, but still, it's something that is deeply ingrained in our belief system, that there is life after death. And another poll indicated that 68 to 70% of the people polled, and I'm not sure what the poll number was, of folks had after-death communication with their loved ones. And those things can show up in many ways. They can show up through, it's most common to have a feeling of a presence and just somehow or other know that the dead or the loved one was present. You can perhaps hear a voice, either auditorily or in your head, or you can have a feeling or a touch, or a smell, and those kinds of things. So the after-death experience or communication, when that happens, people have had a feeling of comfort and peace, and that's really usually the purpose of it. So serendipitously, you know how that all works. Serendipity and coincidentally is God's way of hiding out. I ran across this book, The Afterlife of Billy Fingers, and its subtitle is How My Bad Boy Brother proved to me that there's life after death. And so Billy Fingers was the older brother of a woman named Annie Kagan. And Annie Kagan was a chiropractor in New York, and she was sensing that there was more to her, to what she needed to do and more to life. So she retired very early. I mean, she's a young woman, and went to an isolated place in upstate New York. And her brother, who was considerably older than she, Billy, had a very troubled life. He was a drug addict, and he was in and out of trouble and in and out of jail. So shortly after she had moved to upper state New York, around Christmas time, he sent her a little red book, a little blank book, and in it he had said, he had dedicated it, it said, "Dear Annie, everyone needs a book dedicated to them. Love, Bill. Read between the lines." Now she was a little puzzled because Billy never did give Christmas presents, and certainly not anything that was so cryptic as a blank book with a statement that says everybody needs a book dedicated to them. Shortly thereafter, she got a phone call that Billy had been hit by a car as he was running away from an emergency room following an episode of having OD'd. And he had been revived and suddenly just jumped up and ran out of the emergency room, only to be hit by a car and killed. And she was devastated. It was very upsetting to her. And as time progressed, she just managed to work through it, and her life was becoming more and more spiritual. And one night, Billy came to her and spoke to her and started talking with her about his death and about the purpose of death. And so she wrote this book, The Afterlife of Billy Fingers. And so there are two things that I want to just mention about it, and that is that we cannot be judgmental about a soul's development or expansion based on the circumstances and situation of a life. Our founder, Ernest Holmes, talked about the transmutation of a soul, and he also did not believe in reincarnation. So, spiritual belief systems throughout the world tend to have some sort of explanation for a life after death. So this is not necessarily unusual that we're sort of paranoid, I think, about it, or at least we're of different minds. We feel uncomfortable about talking about after death communications or near life. What do I want to say?
Near death experience.
Near death experiences. Thank you so much. Near life, yes, near life too. We feel uncomfortable about talking about that, and yet so many of our belief systems and our spiritual belief systems are based on a life after death. So we're kind of uncomfortable about that. So I'm going to just want to tell you about my own experiences. And then I promise this is the last of my woo-woo conversation for a while. I promise. So, shortly after my husband died, it happened that I had moved and I went to a Halloween party. And I received two things at this Halloween party. One was somebody had given me $160 in cash, $20 bills. They had gifted me that. The other thing I received was food poisoning. Oh. So I barely made it home before I became violently ill, and I was really sick for an extended period of time, like a couple of days or so. When I came back to myself. I remembered that $160, and I couldn't remember what I'd done with it. So I started looking for it. I looked in literally everything I owned. I looked in the clothes that I had worn, through the pockets, all of the clothes, and it wasn't there. I emptied out my purse, piece by piece by piece by piece, 2 or 3 times, and it wasn't there. I looked in all of the little nooks and crannies that is my habit to tuck stuff away, 2 or 3 times, and it wasn't there. It just was not there. So, just to back up a little bit, shortly after my husband died, there were telephone calls. The phone would ring and nobody would be there. The phone would ring and nobody would be there. And then there would be miscellaneous little things like, my mother would call them poltergeist sort of things. Things that would be on the floor that I hadn't, that shouldn't have been there. Like a Christmas star that in the middle of summertime somehow found its way to the middle of the floor. Things like that. Picture turned over, stuff. So I couldn't find this $120. 60, sorry. Get my numbers straight. I don't want to lose anything. All I know, Linda, you're going to tell me. $160.
We already counted them out.
I couldn't find it. So I was folding clothes. Now I remind you, I've been through everything. I was folding clothes after I'd taken them out of the dryer, towels. And I glanced down and there was a photo of my husband and me. And so I said to him out loud, okay, James Edward, if you took the $160, I want it back. I went directly to the washing machine to move the wet clothes into the dryer. What do you think?
There it was.
The $160, all wet, been washed. But I swear to you, I had gone through everything. Having that conversation with him, like, okay, bud, give it back. 3 seconds later, there it was. Now, I think that so many of us have those kinds of experiences with those that have crossed over. And we discount them, or we consider them a coincidence, remembering that coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. So I want to remind you now that 2 things. You can't judge a person's development or expansion, a soul's development or expansion based on the life that they live, and that communication continues after death. And the joy of that and the wonderment of that is that it gives us an opportunity, perhaps, if we hold to that belief, that we can heal circumstances and situations that may be needed to be healed. So it's my belief that you can either have a conversation, which is what I do, or you can maybe write out what you would like the one who has made a transition to know. So if you have lost someone that circumstances and situations were a little difficult, you can work that out. And then expect that there will be some signal or some sign that that communication has occurred. So when my dad died, I was washing my hair, and I heard him say, "Well, I'll be damned." Because he wasn't expecting to go on. But I heard that very clearly, and then I got the call. I know. So, as I said, this is going to be the last of my woo-woo conversation, and it's not my habit necessarily. But I think at this time of the Day of the Dead, that it's important for us to acknowledge that there are more things than we're aware of in our philosophy. I had a friend who died, and he had a particular unpleasant odor, and occasionally I could smell that odor, and then little pulls of my hair would, like, "Hello, I'm here." So those are the things that have happened to me, and I suspect that they've happened to a lot of you, since 90% of the American population believes in a past life. So I would invite you at this time, when the veil is so thin between here and there, wherever there might be, to just keep that in mind and allow yourself, if there's a place that you are needing healing or needing comfort, to just pay attention and invite it, ask it, and see what happens. I love you all. Namaste. I would invite our minister and our practitioners to stand and help me hold the consciousness. I want to remind you, as they move around the room, that they're willing to hold you in prayer for a week. So if there's a circumstance or a situation that you're a little uneasy about, just make sure that you drop a prayer request in the box, and let us support you in prayer. So I invite you to join me with me as I turn within. As I go within to that still, quiet space, where I am greeted by the one that is the one. That place within the core of my essence, that I allow myself to acknowledge that the love of the universe is all there is. And from that place, like a flower, all good grows. I allow myself to stand in love, to keep my heart open, to be at peace, and know that the universe is a loving, friendly place. I allow myself to acknowledge that God is good, God is loving, supportive. And because I am one with that. I hold at the very essence of my being all that is good, all that is true, all that is loving. And that is all there is. So I allow myself to be filled with energy and vitality and vigorous good health. I allow myself to receive abundance upon abundance. I allow myself to be the love I seek, to be the peace that I seek, to be the joy and the laughter and the dance and the glory and the essence of all there is, knowing fully that there is nothing aside from that, outside of it. So I, at this moment, celebrate all who have come before. I give thanks for them, knowing that I stand on their shoulders. As the expression of the good. I invite you to allow yourself to be filled with peace, to be filled with that knowing that your soul is expanding right this moment, that you are a glorious expression of the divine. You are it. You are the blessing. And so I invite you to join with me as we just anchor that truth, as we express that truth, as we celebrate that truth by declaring it done and by saying, and so it is.